All right. So Joshua Cassidy has asked, how in depth is your planning process? Is it more seat of the pants, or do you write/design a lot of possible things beforehand? Any hot tips for this? So I will give you some answers and some hot tips here. My first answer is I do fairly in-depth planning for the podcast, obviously because of both like the nature of recording a podcast and the players that we have. Like a lot of the times, I just have to like go with the flow, and so I don't do as much intensive planning as you might see some other DMs do for other mediums. And what I mean by that is things like visual aids, handouts, really detailed maps is not something that I do because it's not something that is translated in this medium. So when we record, we explicitly don't use handouts and things like that because nobody wants to hear us talk about the cool stuff that we're passing around. That said, I do design a lot of this, like the story and like the story beats that I want the players to hit ahead of time. And even when things take a left turn for like several episodes in a row, I still kind of have a good sense of one, where things are going to go eventually, and two, as we only usually record a few episodes at a time, so I will adapt my planning as we go. But I do plan quite quite a lot for the show. Are there tips for this? Yeah, so never overplan is the big tip that I could suggest. Whether you're running a game for a podcast or just for players at a table, if you go out of your way to plan too much, you're gonna just have wasted a lot of time because players always do the thing you don't expect them to do. And so if you don't necessarily want to commit a huge amount of time, running pre-written adventures is always a like legitimate option. There's some really good ones out there, and you can like hack and modify them in any ways that you want. But yeah, basically it helps to write flowcharts as well. So you can design like a flowchart where it'll say like if they take this option, then maybe this stuff will happen and things like that. It's kind of a give and take process. A lot of it comes down to the group that you're with and just sort of feeling it out and learning and experience and all that stuff. Hopefully that answers your questions. If you have any more follow-up questions, just let me know and I'd be happy to answer. Colin Runge asks, and by the way, I'm sorry if I've mispronounced anyone's name. Running my first homebrew, and I'm struggling with how to balance allowing them to explore the world and also to get them to the material that I create that advances the story. Any tips for how to allow freedom while not also over preparing? So I can go more in depth from the last question then. And yeah, this is a tough call. Like, this is not something that is easy. It's something that'll come with experience. You are probably going to over prepare the first few times. But it's good. It's always try and plan your stuff as modularly as possible. And what I mean by that is maybe you can design a dungeon that can fit into a lot of different environments, or maybe you can design a story beat that doesn't have to happen at an exact moment. So even if your players take the left turns that you don't expect them to, that monster just around the corner is around that corner no matter what corner it happens to be, if that makes sense to you. So try and design like encounters and things that you can like slot into different situations, and always remember that the story you're planning is a story for the players. So they're the ones who are driving the story, and they should get to have the story that they want to have. So don't force your story on the players when that's not what they actually want to do. Make sure that everyone's there having a fun time, and then it's a collaborative experience because that's what D&D is, and everyone's going to have fun, and you'll make mistakes and over prepare or under prepare, and just grab something out of the Dungeon Master's Guide and throw things in. Feel it out. It's something that comes with experience, like I said before, and you'll get the hang of it. But yeah, always have sort of plans in your back pocket. That would be my main takeaway suggestion there. Christopher Johnson says, "Hi Matt, I've noticed the player groups in the podcast only ever interact with one NPC at a time or with the leader of an NPC group or faction. The Mayor of Stoneward comes to mind, his attendant Bard. Do you have any tips for how to RP groups of NPCs vis-a-vis the players, i.e. with a town council where everyone isn't on the same page? Thanks heaps for the show. Cheers from Sweden." Thanks a lot, Christopher. I really appreciate it. And hello to Sweden. On behalf of all of Canada, I'd just like to say you guys are cool. So thanks. Um, when it comes to me with NPCs on the show, it can be a little bit different with a group at a table versus the podcast, and I sort of spoke to that earlier, and I think that's something that's relevant because on our podcast, I really want the players to shine as much as possible. It's the story. I think the people kind of they like to listen for the players, for those characters, like right now for Jimmy and Malachi and Percy, and I think I don't want to have a menagerie of NPCs all at the same time that are like sort of cluttering up the action, but that can be fun sometimes. A lot of the times it's sort of like with movie screenwriting where you'll have a character that represents a larger group, so you don't have to have like 50 actors cast in the movie. Well, it's sort of the same thing here. I'll use the minimal NPCs when I can because I like to keep things moving. And it can be confusing for listeners and for the players sometimes to have too many NPCs. Like if you've got like 8 guys who are all like coming up at once, they're all a bunch of dwarves. They've all walked into the room. They introduce themselves and they have like unique names and backgrounds and like they have like rich backstories, all of them. Like you've done something really cool as a DM, but your players are not going to remember any of them because they're all going to blend together in their heads. So you have to kind of keep that in mind usually. That's not to discourage anybody from using like big groups of NPCs. That can absolutely be like funny and a cool thing to do. But yeah, make sure they're all very distinct. Even when you have multiple ones, don't have like too many. Like even a town council, you'd probably want to have like 5 max, I would say, just because at that point you probably are having some ideology stepping over each other and things like that. But yeah, so I would have each NPC like sort of represent an idea or a personality trait and try not to overlap them too much. And so I think that's enough questions for now. I'll get to a few more next time. Thanks again, everybody, for asking. Really enjoyed doing this. And yeah, I'll answer more questions soon.